Picture a tiny mountain hamlet where just 7 souls keep the lights on, yet 2 cafes still serve coffee to passing tourists. This is the stark face of Greece's rural demographic crisis. But here's where it gets controversial. Some argue that the mass departure is an inevitable outcome of modern life, while others point fingers at policy missteps that have left villages to wither. Nestled among the craggy peaks of the Pindos mountain range in central Greece, the settlement of Abelohori clings to the hillside like a handful of weathered stones. The name itself hints at its past. Abeli means vineyard in Greek, reflecting a time when the community's lifeblood was wine production and livestock farming. In its heyday, hundreds of families tended vines that draped the slopes and raised herds that roamed the pastures. Today, that bustling scene has faded to a handful of permanent residents, 7 people, including the village priest. Yet the village still boasts 2 modest cafes that welcome locals and the occasional summer visitor. Life in Abelohori is marked by stark omissions. There is no school to educate children, no resident doctor to tend to everyday ailments, and the nearest hospital sits in the town of Metsovo, roughly 20 miles, about 32 kilometers away. In emergencies, that distance can become a matter of life and death. Village President Athanasios Nikogiannis told Greek Reporter that the exodus began in the 1980s. He explained people abandoned the vineyards and left for the cities and tourist resorts to work in the hospitality sector. The 7 permanent residents try to help each other, but our village has become a summer destination only. His mother, Veliki Nikogianni, has run one of the cafes for 70 years. When asked about her feelings toward the place she calls home, she replied, "I love my village. It's so beautiful. I run the cafe and I look after my garden and my flowers." Her devotion illustrates how deep roots can persist even as the population thins. The second cafe is operated by Dimitris, who shares a similarly optimistic outlook. There is no pollution. The landscape is beautiful and it's quiet. Everything is good. For him, the serenity and unspoilt nature outweigh the inconveniences of isolation. And this is the part most people miss. Abelohori is not an isolated case, but a vivid illustration of a nationwide trend that is reshaping Greece's countryside. Across the country's mountainous interiors and its many small islands, villages are witnessing their populations halve or even dwindle to a handful of elderly inhabitants, turning some settlements into near ghost towns. The remaining residents are overwhelmingly older, as younger generations have migrated to urban centres in search of education and employment, leading to a falling birth rate that further accelerates the ageing of the community. Rural economies, traditionally anchored in agriculture, have struggled to compete with modern, service-oriented sectors. Young people often see little future in farming or livestock rearing, especially as market pressures, climate challenges, and limited access to technology make these livelihoods increasingly precarious. Basic amenities, such as reliable healthcare, schooling, and public transportation, are often sparse or absent, making remote villages unattractive for families with children. This lack of infrastructure creates a feedback loop. Fewer services drive more people away, which in turn leads to even fewer services. Greece already ranks among the most aged nations in Europe, and according to the OECD, it is projected to become the continent's most elderly country by 2050. The OECD's Health at a Glance Europe 2024 report predicts that more than 35% of Greeks will be over 65 by that year. A demographic shift that threatens the labour force, the economy, and social cohesion. Compounding the issue, Greece's total fertility rate has slipped to just 1.3 children per woman, well below the replacement level of 2.1 needed to keep a population stable. This places Greece among the lowest birth rate nations worldwide. The erosion of rural populations also endangers centuries-old customs, dialects, and traditional crafts that have been passed down through generations. When a village like Abelohori loses its young people, it also loses the living memory of festivals, recipes, and stories that define its cultural identity. Some critics argue that government incentives for urban development have unintentionally drained the countryside, while others claim that preserving these villages is an unsustainable romantic ideal. The debate raises a crucial question. Should policymakers pour resources into reviving remote hamlets like Abelohori, perhaps by promoting ecotourism, remote work hubs, or agricultural subsidies? Or is it more realistic to accept that the future of these places lies in seasonal tourism and heritage preservation rather than permanent residency? Potential solutions are already being tested elsewhere. In parts of the Peloponnese, municipalities have offered tax breaks and low-interest loans to entrepreneurs willing to open boutique hotels or artisanal food workshops. In the islands of the Aegean, high-speed internet installations have attracted digital nomads who work remotely while immersing themselves in local culture. Could similar initiatives breathe new life into Abelohori, or would they merely create a veneer of activity without addressing the underlying demographic imbalance? We'd love to hear your perspective. Do you think the state should intervene to sustain permanent communities in remote villages, or should market forces decide their fate? Is turning these dwindling hamlets into niche tourist destinations a viable path forward? Or does it risk commodifying a precious cultural heritage? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice could shape the conversation about Greece's rural future. For more on the story of Abelohori, see Greek Reporter's coverage. https:/greekreporter.com/Greece. The Pindos mountain range is part of a UNESCO Global Geopark. https:/greekreporter.com/2024-28 Greece Meteora designated UNESCO Global Geopark. Detailed OECD projections can be found in Health at a Glance Europe 2024. https:/www.oecd.org/n Publications Health at a Glance bit en HTML. The latest demographic data for Greece are discussed here. https:/greekreporter.com/2025/01/2/ Greece demographic decline for, and the country's low fertility rate is documented at https:/Greece lowest reproduction rate Europe. A related story about a village that appears to defy the crisis can be read at https:/Greekreporter.com/2024/03/22/Village defies demographic crisis Greece.